Okay. Good afternoon, everyone, and welcome to a press briefing with Ambassador Karen Pierce on the UK presidency of the Security Council in August. The Ambassador will make some brief remarks, and then we will open the floor to questions.
Great. Well, happy 1st of August, everybody. This is the first day of the UK presidency. As well as Matt, I'm joined by Stephen Hickey, who many of you will know as the UK political coordinator and councillor, and also Crystal Downing, who is our presidency coordinator. So if there's more you need to follow up with, these three colleagues are the right people to do it. We're very honoured to have the presidency in August. I think if one had a totally free choice, August would not be the month that one would pick, because so many PRs go away and so many foreign ministers are not able to come to New York. But we want to make a virtue out of that. We want to focus the council on areas where we believe it can be targeted, it can be action-oriented, it can make a difference. And I'll go into some of those in a minute. We also want to pay tribute to the magnificent job done by the Swedish ambassador and his colleagues. I think particularly one of the great things they did was in their thematic briefings on climate security and children in armed conflict, where they really were able to bring issues together, drawing across all the range of the UN's work in a way that we all talk about, but you very rarely see in the Security Council. And we would like also to try and make the operation of the Council as efficient and effective and real world as possible. And I'll come on to that at the end, if I may. So I'll start with what we call discretionary events. These are our initiative events. They're not dictated by the regular pace of business in the Security Council. The first one we hope to do is an open briefing on the afternoon of 28th of August on Myanmar, Burma. This is 1 year on from the major expulsions in the Rohingya crisis. You will know, and Michelle was on the trip, that the Security Council went to Myanmar, Burma and Bangladesh earlier this year. The Council has remained more or less united on this issue since then. It's an issue the Council wants to keep at the forefront of the agenda, and there's a lot of interest in following up where things are. Since the Council's visit, there has been the signing of the MOU with the UN, and there have been a commission of inquiry set up by the Burmese government, and there has been a special envoy appointed by the Secretary-General who briefed the Council in July. What we particularly would like to use August for is to commemorate that 1 year anniversary of what the Secretary-General called ethnic cleansing. We want to use it to make significant progress on the implementation of the MOU, which principally comes down to letting the UN, particularly UNHCR and UNDP, have unconditional access so that they can begin to work with both the Burmese and the Bangladeshi governments to make a credible plan to get the refugees back home in safety, dignity and security. That in turn will depend on there being livelihoods and places for them to go back to. So it's a huge issue, but the Council is very seized of it. I think the second Burmese issue is obviously accountability for what happened. I think everyone who saw the camps was very moved by what they saw and the stories there. The Burmese government have announced their commission of inquiry, and they have just announced the names of 3 members of it. That's a very good step forward. We look forward to engaging on the terms of reference and how exactly that commission of inquiry will work. And we hope it will be able to work cooperatively with UN mechanisms, obviously, particularly the Office of the High Commissioner for Human Rights. And then the last set of issues around Myanmar, Burma, concerns the question of citizenship for the Rohingya, which the Council was very interested in on its trip, and the issues around the Rakhine Advisory Commission, which have made, as you know, a number of recommendations about reform in Myanmar, Burma itself, and the Council looks forward to engaging on all of those. Turning to where the refugees are now in Cox's Bazar, the Council will want to review the humanitarian situation. We will want to talk to the Bangladeshi government about what can be done to help the refugees cope with things like the monsoon, what the future holds, and we will also want to try and encourage donors to be supportive of the Bangladeshi government for hosting quite so many refugees. Bangladesh's economy has, since independence, been doing pretty well, and it would be a double blow if their generosity in housing these refugees were to set their economy back. So we'd like to be able in some form to prompt a debate about how the UN and the international community can best help that. So we look forward to that on the 28th of August. We hope the Secretary-General will be able to brief, and we also hope to have a visiting British minister alongside the Secretary-General and UNHCR. The next day, we have our other discretionary event, an open debate on mediation and its role in conflict prevention. This is on 29 August. Over the years, the UN has been increasing the amount of effort it puts into mediation. I think everybody feels that there's still more that could be done there. There's more we can do to share best practice. There's more we can do to talk about what works. A lot of countries, both on and off the Council, have very personal experiences of how mediation has helped resolve conflict or see off the threat of conflict, and we want to tap in to all that knowledge. It is a General Assembly issue. It's not our intention to use the work from the General Assembly, but it is our intention to focus on the fact that mediation has a very important role in international peace and security, and this is something Antonio Guterres has been saying, and we want to use it to support him. As I say, we'll have a British minister, and we also hope that the Archbishop of Canterbury, who is the head of the Anglican Communion worldwide and a member of the Secretary-General's panel on mediation, we hope he will be able to come and join us. So those are our two big discretionary events. Starting this week, starting tomorrow, we have one of the big peace and security issues on the Council, Yemen, that the Council will look at with the Special Envoy Martin Griffiths, and Mark Lowcock from OCHA will also be briefing. They will cover the current political and humanitarian situation, including the situation around Hodeidah, but we also expect Martin to say something about the future political process. Again, on Yemen, the Council has tried very hard to unite behind Martin and commend his efforts to all the parties, and I would expect that to continue tomorrow. Looking beyond that, we have Syria chemical weapons on the 2nd of August also. That's the regular monthly consultations. Disarmament Affairs will brief on the ongoing investigation into the suspected use of chemical weapons in Douma and on the Syrian government's efforts or otherwise to fulfill their commitments to OPCW. On the 8th of August, we have a session on Iraq with the SRSG Jan Kubish, and we expect him to focus on political developments, including the recent protests and the progress towards forming a government. On the 8th of August, also, the ex-president of Germany, President Köhler, who is the Special Envoy for Western Sahara, will be in the United States and has asked to update the Council on his work so far, so the Council will hear from him. On the 9th of August, we take Burundi, again with the Special Envoy Kafando, and he has been round the region, and he will be able to brief us on the prospects for the next round of talks at what is a crucial moment for the Arusha Accords. Then on 9th of August, we have a UNIFIL troop contributors meeting, which precedes a council meeting on UNIFIL on the 15th of August, with, I think, a mandate due to be adopted later on in the month. And then 22nd of August, immediately after the International Day for the Victims of Terrorism, we have a session on threats to international peace and security caused by terrorist acts. This flows from resolutions 2253 and 2368. These requested the Secretary-General to provide strategic-level reports that demonstrate and reflect the gravity of the terrorist threat, and it will be a biannual update also on the threat posed by ISIL-Daesh, and it reflects the range of UN work in support of member states. And Mr. Voronkov, USG Voronkov, will brief us, we hope, on that. On 23rd of August, there will be a session on the Middle East, where Under Secretary-General Rosemary DiCarlo will brief us on developments in Israel and the occupied Palestinian territories. Given the upsurge in violence in Gaza, this is obviously something the Council takes very seriously and will want to follow very closely. On 28th of August, we have Syrian humanitarian. Again, Mark Lowcock will give us an update, particularly in the southwest and around Idlib. And then on 30 August, we will take Guinea-Bissau, which will be an opportunity to review the situation in country and look at the operation of the sanctions regime. We will have the SRSG brief us on that. And then the last session will be 30 August, and it'll be the 1718 committee, which, as you all know, is DPRK sanctions. We are, in addition to the programme of work, trying to do a few cultural events, particularly relevant to Britain. It rained this morning, so that was a very good reminder that we have moved on from Sweden to the United Kingdom. We will be inviting our Security Council colleagues to join us for one of those fantastic New York attractions, Shakespeare in the Park, and it will be 12th night. And then we hope to close the presidency with an end of presidency garden party, to which you will all be invited, but we warn you now, we will be expecting you to wear a hat, men as well as women. So thank you very much. We're very happy to answer any of your questions on the presidency or on other issues.
Sherwin, do you want to go first?
Madam President, Ambassador Dame Karen Pierce.
You
Hats
just
off
like
to you.
saying that. Oh, very good. That's very good.
On behalf of the UN Correspondents Association, thanks for coming to talk to us, and we look forward to continued engagement through the month of August, except on Mondays, Tuesdays, and Fridays.
Those are reserved for the inevitable crises, Sherwin.
Exactly, those emergency council meetings. Since you mentioned that the need to, position the council as operational and real world, why don't we talk about Zimbabwe, given the UK's long-standing relationship with that country as a former colonial power? Elections this week, we've seen violence on the streets today, 3 people are now confirmed dead, the army's on the streets, live ammunition. What could you say, particularly given the UN's focus on preventative diplomacy?
I think it's an obvious question, and thank you for asking it. I think everybody feels that Zimbabwe stands at a really important moment after all the difficulties of the last few years. Here at last is a chance. But the violence is extremely concerning, and British ministers have gone on the record condemning that. It's not actually clear at the moment what will happen next. We are watching that very closely and will continue to watch it closely. We look to the government to do everything it can to restrain the violence and get things back on a democratic track. As I say, there is a huge opportunity here for the people of Zimbabwe, and we wish the people of Zimbabwe well, but we need to watch things closely and react as things develop.
Okay, we'll try to work through as many questions as possible. When you ask, please could you say your name and your outlet as well, please. Joe, I saw your hand up first.
Thank you. Joseph Klein, Canada Free Press. One item I notice is not on the calendar or even in the footnote is Cameroon. And there has been, as you know, a spate of violence both by government security forces and armed groups, and there was a horrific video of executions of women and children. Is this something that you would consider undertaking a meeting on, given the increasing violence?
I saw a delegation of ministers from Cameroon on the 11th of July here, and was able to repeat to them the messages that my government, as Britain, has been giving about the need for a reduction in the violence, the need for the military to act proportionately at all times, and the need for dialogue to happen and make real concrete progress. At the moment, that is our particular focus. But as presidency of the Security Council, I certainly don't rule out that somebody may ask for a briefing on Cameroon. And as presidency, we would do our best to respond to that. But I think the initiative at the moment remains with the president and government of Cameroon.
Well, just a quick follow-up. Do you believe, perhaps in your national capacity, that the government, which essentially is under one-man rule, can truly undertake a, quote, independent investigation of the violent incidents on both sides?
Any government that wants an independent investigation can undertake one. They can invite the UN in to help them. So, yes, they can do it. We will obviously be pressing for the investigation to be truly independent. I don't want to set benchmarks for that, but ways do exist internationally for governments to invite into domestic inquiries enough international representation for people to have confidence that it will be independent.
Talal.
Thank you very much. My name is Talal Haj from Al Arabiya. Martin Griffiths, the special envoy, has left after shuttle diplomacy between the parties, has left Hodeidah without reaching an agreement on the implementation of his latest plan on Yemen by the Houthis, demanding their withdrawal in exchange for other points. How do you view in your national capacity and maybe the Security Council resuming direct talks between all the parties concerned, and leaving the Hodeidah question aside and the fighting continuing? Is that a possibility? Is it feasible that he might set tomorrow a date or a time for resuming the talks that has been suspended for a while, without finding first a solution to the fighting that's going on in Hodeidah? And a second point concerning the mines that had been planted by the Houthis everywhere and also in the Red Sea. And today we heard news of large maneuvers, naval maneuvers by Iran in the Strait of Hormuz and the Gulf. How concerned are you about the freedom of movement of maritime trade and in the Gulf and in the Red Sea? Thank you very much.
I think as presidency, I won't preempt what Martin may say to the council tomorrow. He's now here. The last time we talked to Martin as a council, we did it by VTC, but Martin is actually here in New York, so we'll be able to have quite detailed exchanges with him. But we will at least start in public, so you'll be able to hear what Martin has to say. So I don't want to preempt that, but I think he does believe that he can set out a helpful way forward. I think as Britain, the big issue around Hodeidah is its humanitarian significance, because it's a port through which the vast majority of supplies, both commercial and humanitarian, come to the Yemeni people. So we're very sensitive to activity that involves Hodeidah. But we also have every confidence in Martin setting out a process that tries to sequence these things in a way that is helpful. So we look forward to hearing what Martin says tomorrow, and I'd be happy to comment further after we've heard his plan. On the maritime point, I think this is very dangerous from a security perspective, but it's also dangerous from an economic perspective for just about everybody. Freedom of the high seas, freedom of navigation exists, so security and trade can prosper. So yes, that is something we take very seriously. It's something we talk to our allies and partners about. It's something we will want to keep under close review.
Just to follow up, do you see a feasibility of having talks between the parties, direct talks, while the fighting in Hodeidah is continuing? Is that feasible?
One should never answer a hypothetical question, especially from well-known journalists who have your experience. But if you are asking me, are there precedents where talking and fighting can happen at the same time, then yes, we both know there are.
Michelle.
Thanks, Ambassador, and good luck with the month. Just wanted to ask you about two topics very quickly. North Korea, there's been some discussion or suggestion by some of your council members, Russia and China, that sanctions should be loosened. Are you expecting any sort of further discussion in the council or around the council on that topic during this month? And DRC, there won't be a trip this month. Some of your colleagues mentioned it might be in October. How concerned are you about the situation there? There was some activity there today with the arrival back of the opposition leader.
Taking DPRK first, thank you for the question. And it was very good to have Secretary Pompeo here with the Korean Foreign Minister in July. And I think the Council was able to have a really good informal discussion with both of those foreign ministers. There isn't a move at the moment to have DPRK on the agenda during the British presidency. I don't see a need for that, but as I said earlier, if we need to react to developments, then we can do. I think the majority of views in the Council are that pressure needs to continue until there are concrete steps on denuclearisation. And when we say denuclearisation, we mean complete, verifiable and irreversible denuclearisation. And so far, there hasn't been any serious challenge to that concept. And I think, on the contrary, DPRK is a very good example of what the Security Council can achieve when it stays united. And I think it's made a real step forward in support of President Trump on nuclear non-proliferation generally. On DRC, yes, we watched that very closely. A number of council members made a very similar point to you, Michelle, just now. It may well be something we end up having a discussion on. There were supposed to be a couple of high-level visits there. As you say, the Council wants to undertake a mission there. We will keep it under review and we will respond to developments as necessary.
And just a really quick follow-up. How concerned are you by some of these reports this week that North Korea is still working on long-range missiles? Is that something that Britain...
Any reports of countries like North Korea working on long-range missiles that can deliver nuclear warheads is bound to be concerning, but I have no special information, particular information about those reports at this time.
Nick. Thanks.
Ambassador, can I just ask about the kind of ministerial representation we're going to see over the coming month? And to be even more parochial, can I ask about the Archbishop of Canterbury? What do you see as his role during your presidency?
He's coming specifically for the open debate on mediation, and he's coming because he is a member of the Secretary-General's panel on mediation, so he has a particular offering to make. He came at our invitation. We wanted to have a briefer who we hoped council members would enjoy hearing from. I've heard the Archbishop speak. I think he'll be a very good contributor. I do know that he comes often to the United Nations and takes his contribution to it very seriously. So I'd expect to see him back here before too long. But in August, it's specifically for that debate.
And as far as ministers are concerned, are we going to see Jeremy Hunt making his debut here?
We don't give out details of ministerial travel this far in advance, but there will be a minister at the debate, and we'll be happy to let you know as soon as we can the name of that minister.
Carol.
Ambassador, on Myanmar, I wanted to know if Britain supports ICC referral on Myanmar, and is that an option that might be or should be discussed at some point at the Council, given the documented mass atrocities in Rakhine? And also quickly on Eritrea, as the penholder, what's the path to lifting sanctions on Eritrea? Thank you.
ICC and Myanmar. Of course, we support the ICC. We're very strong supporters of the ICC. But as you also know, one cannot get an ICC referral for a country that is not accepting the ICC statute, and Myanmar does not accept the ICC statute. One cannot get that referral without a decision of the Security Council. And at the moment, we don't think there would be, in fact, we are 100% sure, there would not be a positive decision. There, therefore, is the question of whether one should try and fail. I don't think we're at that point yet. I know that there's a lot of collection of evidence going on in Bangladesh in the camps. Evidence to a sufficiently high investigative standard against the day when there might be an accountability mechanism, and this might lead to some form of justice. The Human Rights Council in Geneva will hear from the fact-finding mission in September. So I think one would want to take stock after that. On Eritrea, the Council discussed the developments between Ethiopia and Eritrea, and also these affect Djibouti and Somalia, and you'll have seen that the ambassadors of all those countries spoke in the chamber. The time is, I think everybody felt, not yet right to lift sanctions, but it was definitely something that everybody thought the Council would have to return to. Did you want to chip in, Stephen?
I think you said it all, Karen. I think that there is unity in the Council and that everybody wants to support the historic recent developments between Ethiopia and Eritrea. But at the same time, I think there's a recognition that when it comes to lifting sanctions, we do need to respect the decisions that have been taken by the Council, and we need to look at lifting sanctions in a very rigorous and ordered way. So we expect that there will be some positive developments in the coming months.
Evelyn, you indicated you had a follow-up on the same topic.
Yes, Evelyn Leopold, Independent Media. To follow up, Carol, I assume that there's not going to be that there's no will for sanctions in the Security Council, targeted sanctions against the worst perpetrators of violence. And also, who's collecting the evidence in Bangladesh?
My understanding on who's collecting the evidence is that at the moment it is a nationally funded, as in national member state, not by the Bangladeshis, of independent lawyers. But there is obviously a question that flows from that as to whether there should be something more formal. So that's one of the things I think that will be discussed over the coming weeks in Geneva and here. Your first question was
Any
sanctions. The Council has not yet discussed the question of sanctions against individuals for these particular acts. The Burmese government themselves have sent a couple of individuals, have punished them after a finding of guilty in the courts, as I understand it. But the Council itself has not yet addressed the issue of sanctions.
Benny.
During August, new sanctions are being imposed by the United States on Iran. Is that a violation of 2231? Has anyone suggested it to be? And how do you see that appearing in the Council or not?
Well, it would need a Council member to propose it. We did debate the issue of Iran and the JCPOA under the Russian presidency, so it's had an airing relatively recently. In my national capacity, the British position remains that the JCPOA is a valuable contribution to the region and also to the global non-proliferation regime, and we would like to see it continue in being, even as we disagree with some of the activities Iran undertakes in the region, which we consider to be destabilizing. But we continue to support, and we work to support, the nuclear deal.
But to follow up, is it Britain's position that new sanctions violate 2231?
I'm not going to get drawn on that. It's not my position that they violate 2231. I don't think we've commented nationally. The JCPOA is something we would like to see in being.
And on the possibility of talks that has been raised in the last couple of days between the U.S. and Iran on new agreement over the nuclear file?
It's my understanding that President Trump has suggested this, but that the Iranian president has rejected it. There is a historic relationship between Iran and the United States that we are all familiar with and developed in a certain way after 1979. It is for the Americans and Iranians to decide whether they want to talk together. But given what's at stake in terms of regional destabilizing activities by Iran, but also the nuclear deal on the other hand, I think anything that can be done to have constructive and productive discussions should be done.
The lady from TASS, sorry, I forgot your name.
Thank you. It's Maria Hrenova. Thank you, Ambassador. I wanted to thank you, first of all, for your cultural events, as I'm a big admirer of Shakespeare. And my question is about the situation in Central African Republic. As you know, 3 Russian journalists were killed there, and also I saw a report of United Nations experts about big concerns about safety situation there. Do you think that maybe there is a need to discuss this issue in Security Council? Thank you.
Well, I was sorry to hear about the deaths of the journalists, and also, too many UN peacekeepers have very sadly lost their lives there as well. So that tells you something about the fragility of the situation on the ground. It's not an issue before the Council in August, but the Council does discuss it regularly, and if things were to worsen on the ground, then we would be happy to respond to a request from a member state to discuss it.
Thank you very much, Madam Ambassador. A few follow-ups on Myanmar. Can you tell us what the issues are right now about access for the UN? Is UNHCR or UNDP actually getting in? Are they able to travel at all? Also, has there been any progress at all on the citizenship issue, which you spoke about will be on the agenda later this month? And will there be an outcome of the Myanmar meeting on August 28th?
I think on the first, we need to hear an update from UNHCR and UNDP. I personally haven't got that yet, but I saw an update in July, and we were able to reinforce their concerns with the Burmese authorities, and I now look forward to getting another update. As I understand it, the concerns centre mainly around access. But I would need to check that. So we will keep in close touch with UNHCR and UNDP, and where we think we can helpfully discuss that with the Burmese authorities, including the ambassador here, then we'll be very happy to do so as presidency of the council. On citizenship, My understanding is that this is an issue that is probably going to take a while to get off the ground. But again, I'm not exactly up to speed on that, so I don't want to mislead you. It's something the Special Envoy will take an interest in, and therefore I think the best thing is to wait for an update from her.
An outcome from the meeting, is there going to be a press statement, presidential statement, resolution?
The meeting will be in the open chamber with a lot of contributions, so there may not be a need for a specific product afterwards, but we won't decide that this far in advance. We'll look at that closer to the time.
Please go ahead.
Thank you very much. Madam Ambassador, Errol Avdovic, I'm a correspondent for Web Publica, and Dnevni Avaz from Sarajevo, Bosnia. My question is, there are more than dozens now reports, mainly media, that during the British presidency you are going to move toward excluding Kosovo reports, regular Kosovo 3 months report, to be on the topic, on the agenda actually of the Security Council. There are also even some official reactions from Belgrade. Can you tell us what is the issue here, put some more light, since we don't know anything actually here at the Security Council?
Well, I think the first thing to say, in both my national and my presidency capacity, is that the Security Council needs to focus on the most pressing issues of international peace and security. And the issue of Kosovo remains important. It's a very important European regional issue, but it does not remain of the intensity, some 18 years after 1999, of the intensity that requires quite such regular drumbeat of meetings in the Council. So we are talking to the Serbian PR and also to the Russians about what a more targeted rhythm of meetings might look like. And we haven't reached a conclusion yet, but we will carry on talking. And it is our aim, I can't speak for the other side, but it is our aim to try and agree a sensible conclusion that we can all accept. And then we will come back to the Council with that. What I would also like to say, however, is that the most critical thing on Kosovo is that Serbia and Kosovo both make progress with the European Union, who is helping them normalise their relations. And it is only through the normalisation of those relations that they will be able to make progress in integration towards the European Union. And that's really vital for both their peoples and both their economies. So I really would encourage both the capitals involved not to get too much involved in the question of tactics here, but to set their hearts on that bigger goal and put every effort they can into working with the EU High Representative to normalise their relations.
Thank you, Ambassador. Betül Yürük with the Turkish news agency Anadolu. My question will be on Cyprus and the peacekeeping mission on the long-divided island. The UK was the pen holder of a resolution last month to extend the mandate of the peacekeeping mission on the island. It was adopted despite some disagreements in the Council. How do you assess the future of the mission on the island, with the US seeking to reform the mission? And on the political process, we haven't seen any progress after the collapse of the peace talks on the dispute, on the Cyprus dispute. And now the Secretary General's special advisor is having consultations to see whether the talks would resume again. Would the Security Council or the UK itself, as one of the guarantor countries, have a plan B or any other solution rather than the reunification of the island? Thank you.
I'm afraid I was away from New York when Cyprus came to the Security Council, so I'm going to pass over to Stephen, if I may, who can give you more detail.
Well, thank you for the question. We were very pleased at the unanimous adoption of the UNFICIP renewal resolution last week. There was strong support from it from across the Council. You mentioned possible reforms to UNFICIP. We've welcomed the reforms that have already been made over the course of the last year. And of course, as we look ahead to the next mandate renewal, we'll be continuing that dialogue with the US and with other partners on the Council about how we look to strengthen UNFICIP further. When it comes to the political process, of course, we've had the visit recently by Jane Hole-Lute. I think the mood in the Council at the moment is that we should do everything we can to support those talks, to explore whether it's possible to restart the political process. And we look forward to hearing back from Jane Hole-Lute on her return to New York. Once we have that assessment, we'll make some calculations about where we go next in terms of the political process and also with UNFICIP. Thank you.
Yes, thank you, Madam President. And my question is about something related to what's happening on the 29th. On the 29th, there's the question of mediation is being brought up, and I appreciate that you said that that was going to be the purview of the General Assembly, but it should be brought up and taken up. I wondered your thinking about Article 32 under Chapter 5 of the Charter, which says that if a country is a party to a dispute under consideration by the Security Council, they shall be invited to participate without vote in the discussion relating to the dispute. And for example, there was the discussion in the South Korean mission, and under the Charter, had that discussion been in the Security Council, under that provision of the Charter, I wonder if you're thinking about whether it is obligatory for the UN members, the Security Council members, to invite, for example, the DPRK and hear their views on what's happening, because it was a very interesting situation. Secretary of State Pompeo had been to North Korea, and we also had Foreign Minister Kang. And so had we also had the DPRK, we would have had a broader set of views, but also something the Charter puts forward. And there is precedent for this happening in the past in the Security Council. Thank you.
Well, thanks very much for the question. I think the whole point of this meeting is that it wasn't a formal meeting of the Security Council. It was an invitational meeting from the Republic of Korea ambassador here to listen to Secretary Pompeo and Foreign Minister Kang. So in that respect, I don't find it difficult or odd or in any way wrong that the North Korean delegation were not invited. Had the debate, the meeting taken place in the Council in open chamber, then I'm sure the normal UN rules and permissions and opportunities would have applied. But I think it's also important that the Council can discuss issues behind closed doors and can choose to discuss them with whoever it finds most relevant to its meetings. And it was an informal meeting.
Thank you. And that is just, is there a time, particularly given the current situation, that in fact the Council would be interested in inviting and hearing the DPRK position and their view in line with what the Charter proposes if it's a dispute, but also the dispute has made many steps forward, and I think the Council would benefit from hearing from them if that were possible. So I'm just wondering, do you see any possibility of looking at that section of the Charter and considering whether they can be invited and the views of the Korean Peninsula on the situation of what's happening could be heard some more from both sides? But there's one view now in some ways on certain issues because they've signed an agreement. So yes, thank you.
there's nothing stopping DPRK from making a request to speak in the Council whenever the Council discusses the Korean Peninsula or 1540 or human rights in DPRK or whatever it is. There's nothing to stop them under something called Rule 37 in the Rules of Procedure from making that request. And I think it highly unlikely the Council would ever say no. I mean, the Council just doesn't say no to Rule 37 requests. So I don't think the deficit, to be absolutely honest, is on the Council's side. The DPRK delegation is welcome to make that request. That said, there is no debate on DPRK scheduled for the next month.
Pam.
Thank you very much, Matt. And Madam Ambassador, Madam President, we're looking forward to the month. It's Pamela Falk from CBS News. The UN High Commissioner is coming to the UN tomorrow for human rights, Zaid al-Hussein, and the UN is involved in a search for the next. What would you say are the best qualities that he has conveyed? What has his very active voice done for human rights? And what are you looking for in the next one? And just because UNGA is only 50 days out, do you have any hopes and expectations? Your Prime Minister is on the agenda. What would one or two of the big picture issues that you would hope would be discussed at UNGA? Thank you.
Thanks very much. Well, I've had the privilege of knowing High Commissioner Pillay as well as High Commissioner Zaid, and I think both of them have been outstanding representatives of the human rights community. They have done the job slightly differently, as you would expect, but both of them have really tried to use the power of that office to the maximum to advance human rights, to help protect ordinary citizens, millions of ordinary citizens, right the way round the globe. And I think with reference to Zaid in particular, he's very honest. He is very clear and transparent when he sees something that he believes to be a transgression of human rights. He calls it out. And I think that's an incredible, valuable quality in the premier UN official who is charged by the international community in protecting the human rights of everyone round the globe. And this year, as you know, is the 70th anniversary of the Universal Declaration of Human Rights. And it is a matter of lasting astonishment to me how often we still keep having to champion the things that are in that Universal Declaration. And Zaid has been one of the most stalwart champions. So I'm sure the next High Commissioner will do the job in his or her particular way. It is an appointment of the Secretary-General. It's not up to member states. It's not an election. And the Secretary-General has, I understand, issued an advert asking for applicants. For our part, as Britain, we will work to the best of our ability to uphold the human rights work that High Commissioner Zaid and High Commissioner Pillay have started. On UNGA, well, I won't go into details of the Prime Minister's travel, but the Prime Minister is on record as saying she is a very firm supporter of the multilateral system. We believe, and we're not alone in this, and that it is under threat, and that those of us who do support it and want to play a major role in it need to help defend it. And I'm sure the Prime Minister will be considering her UNGA attendance and how she wants to spend her time here in the light of what she believes she can do to best uphold the multilateral system.
Gentleman there, go ahead.
Thank you very much. Madam Ambassador, Stefano Vicara, Radio Radicale in Rome and La Voce di New York. About Libya, you have Libya in your program. It's been now a while that Libya is in such a unstable condition, and the Security Council have been, had now already several special envoys, and they've been announcing, a process when maybe a new election coming. But there is, I was just a couple of days, 2 days ago in Washington for a press conference of the Italian Prime Minister with the President Trump, and the talk was all about Libya. And they were announcing that there was a new way to handle the issue, where the United States will help Italy to find a new way to find stability. So my question is, because actually it was the Security Council that I don't want to use the expression created a mess, but for sure the beginning was after the Security Council intervened in Libya. So how long and what the Security Council can do that didn't do yet to make this country stable again, and what do you think didn't do it, and why? And if there was still, if there is, we want to call it competition between countries, European countries, and that's why the process is slowing down, and why the Security Council don't fix this issue.
There are a lot of questions there. So I'm going to start with one from me back. The Security Council does not create a mess. The people on the ground create the mess. The people on the ground are the ones attacking each other, and the people on the ground are the ones who do not come to work with the United Nations and the international community to solve what is happening on the ground and what is happening to the people and the economy of Libya. That's the most important thing. The primary responsibility belongs to the leaders on the ground, who need to work with the UN and other countries, including Italy, including mine, including the United States and France and Egypt and the Emirates, and all the other countries who have a very deep interest in Libya to help bring stability. But I repeat, the primary responsibility rests with those people on the ground to make the necessary steps to get a political process going, to get a credible electoral cycle going, and to get the economy in Libya going again. And I just need to be really clear about that, because it's too easy, I think, to blame the UN for things that are happening in other people's countries when the people in those countries are not making the maximum effort. That said, Hassan Salameh, the SRSG, is doing his best to bring the various factions together. We had a really interesting briefing from him in closed consultations the other day under the Swedish presidency. I think the economics of what are happening is incredibly interesting. You know, it's clear there are these parallel institutions, and it's also clear that dealing with the economic factors is a large part of being able to craft a way ahead. For Britain, we will be ready to contribute to international community efforts. We're ready to work with the Americans and Italians and the other countries I mentioned. I don't think the international community needs to be competitive about this. We all have an interest in Libya being a stable and prosperous country, and we've worked very well together in the past, and I'm absolutely certain we will do so again.
So just a quick follow-up. So you don't see a competition, let's say Italy, France, maybe even your country, you don't see that there's been, for now several years, a competition in finding, well, let's say in a benign way, finding a way, but there has been competing way to find this, and this has been slowing down the process for the UN finally find a deal for Libya.
I wouldn't describe it as competition, I think. But what I'm about to say may strike you as competition. The problem to date has been that there hasn't been a single plan around which everybody with an interest in Libya's stability and prosperity, and that includes the leaders of the factions themselves, can rally. Hassan Salameh has now produced that plan, so it behoves all of us to rally to him and help him implement it. That, I think, is the most important thing. And I'm sure that in respect of anger, to go to a previous question, Libya will be one of the issues, if not discussed formally, then certainly discussed in the margins among all our leaders.
George.
Thank you. George Baumgarten, correspondent for Jewish newspapers and other media as far afield as East Africa, Georgia, and particularly Kazakhstan. A couple of little questions. Firstly, do I understand correctly that the meeting on the 23rd on the Middle East is the usual meeting on Israel and the Palestinian question? Second, do I understand correctly that the visit of the Archbishop of Canterbury and appearance will be on the 29th, the mediation meeting, and is there any, what is the purpose of having the week after next almost open except for the meeting on the 15th, other than for developing crises? And in connection with Myanmar, if I may, it's not something I cover normally, the most important issue, it seems to me, is has anyone developed or proposed any proposals, any ideas as to guarantees of safety of the Rohingya refugees when they come back to Rakhine State, which it seems to me is the most important thing. And I can't let this go without thinking of and mentioning that this is the very country, this is the very region of the country for which one of your country's greatest generals of the last century, General Ord Wingate, gave his life in, I think it was March 44, in just this part of what was then Burma. Thank you.
Right, there's a lot there, so Stephen will chip in if I miss anything. Yes, you are correct. The 23rd of August will be a briefing about the situation in Israel and the occupied Palestinian territories, and that is a regular session. Yes, the Archbishop will come on the 29th of August for the mediation debate. He's not making a long visit on this occasion, but as I said earlier, he makes frequent visits to New York. He's very interested in the work of the United Nations. I had a very good chat with him before I took up my job as ambassador. So I think you can expect to see him here in New York from time to time. There is no significance at all in the week of 13 August. We could have written out the meetings in a different way. We try and concentrate them, not least because it's easier for organisational purposes and for the briefers themselves. You know, we hold briefings when the briefers are available. So you shouldn't read any particular significance into that. We've already had a number of requests from council colleagues to add more meetings, so I'm quite sure the timetable will be filling up. On the Rohingya, it is implicit in the UNHCR plans to get refugees home that they will be safe and secure. And UNHCR cannot recommend refugees go home without those assurances. So it's implicit in the plan working that they should be safe when they get back home, and that they should also have access to livelihoods. So that will be one of the things UNHCR will be working on when they start implementing the MOU. Have I missed something? Oh, General Wingate. I mean, no, we're very conscious of the ties that Britain has to that part of the world. We also have a very good partnership with Bangladesh. We have a lot of interest in Britain in events in both Myanmar and in Bangladesh. We stand ready to help both governments to the best of our ability, and British ministers have made that clear to their leaders.
Okay, we'll take a final question. I'll go Linda then.
Thank you, Ambassador. Linda Fasulo for NPR. I know that you said there'll be the regular meeting between on the Israeli-Palestinian crisis coming up, but I was wondering, given the rising tensions and the escalation along the border of Gaza, do you expect that perhaps there'll be a meeting directed specifically on the Gazan issue, specifically? And secondly, we know the Security Council makes visits to various conflict areas. Do you think there could be anything positive that could come out of a Security Council delegation going to Gaza?
On the first question, we don't have any plans to hold a Gaza-specific meeting. But any delegation on the council can request a meeting at any time on any issue, and then the council takes a decision. So if there were to be an escalation in violence, there is certainly an option of doing that. But I can't say at the moment, because it's hypothetical, whether that position that threshold would be reached. But as I say, any council member can request the council to meet in emergency session at any time. Would a Security Council mission to Gaza help? Would the parties want to see the Security Council there? I think that would be the first question. And if the answer to that question was no, then I think there would be a difficulty. But the Security Council does hear from a very wide range of briefers and experts, as well as the UN itself, on the situation on the ground. So I'm confident that Council has access to good sources of information.
Okay, we have a final special announcement from the Ambassador.
So today is not just Swiss National Day, which you're all celebrating, and the launch of the British presidency. It is also Evelyn's birthday, and it is Evelyn's 80th birthday. And to celebrate one of the icons of the UN Press Corps, we have a cake. Oh, I'm so sorry. I have been misinformed. It's still your birthday, though. So can I invite everyone to join in a rousing chorus of happy birthday. Happy birthday to you. Happy birthday to you. Happy birthday, dear Eloise. Happy birthday.
Hang on. Wait, just blow it out. Blow it out. You have to blow it out. It's your cake.
That's the 79
Well done. Thank you. Happy birthday. Oh, it's a red velvet cake. They're the best. You need a red velvet frock. Thank you. Well done. That's good. I'd get the age right next time, but that's good.